Hello everybody, in this video we're going to go over topic 3.6 of the AP CSP exam, Conditionals. Alright, let's get going. By this time, all of you have made if statements in your coding. You use them whenever you want to check something or test something. If you read something in English that says check or test, the alarm bells should be going off. You know you'll be using an if in your code. First, reviewing Boolean expressions. As a review, an expression in math is something like x plus x plus x. You see these in math all the time, and you're asked to simplify it. That's an expression. A Boolean is something that's either true or false. So when you put these two together, a Boolean expression is something that you simplify, and at the end, you're going to have either a true or a false. When you put an if-else with this, if the Boolean expression is true, we run the code that is part of the if. And if this Boolean expression is false, then we run the code that's part of the else. AP calls this Boolean expression here a condition, and when you have an if, it's really just the same thing in this instance as a Boolean expression. So if you hear the word condition, it's just a Boolean expression. Altogether, the if-else plus the Boolean expression is called a conditional statement by the AP board. Conditional statement. This definition doesn't come up too much except for the create task, and there's a potentially mega important thing there. If you see the words conditional statement, you have to know that it means either if or an if-else. Conditional statements like if-else are a subclass of selection, which is when you are selecting between different options. Other selections that are not also conditional statements include things like try, except, match, case. Probably you don't know about these already. They're not in every single language, and they're a little bit more advanced. But as far as why it's important, AP requires selection in your create task, and almost all of you will use the conditional statement form, the if-else. Summarizing what you have to know, 100%. If you see the word conditional statement, that means an if-else. If you see the word selection, that means if-else also for almost every single case. All the time, people take the AP exam, they run into these terms on the create task portion of the exam, they don't understand, and they're absolutely cooked. It's super important. So once again, conditional statement means if-else. Selection also means an if-else. You have to know this. Next thing you need to know. If you come from something like Python or JavaScript, you have things like if, elif, 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 or if, else if. Well, the AP exam does not have any of these things. So if we have a code like this on the left with ifs and elifs and elifs, to write this in AP pseudocode, you need to have nested ifs and elses and ifs and elses like here on the right. That's going to be the topic of 3.7, which is nested conditionals, and we'll do that later. Lastly, I want to describe a common scenario that confuses people. If you have a program like this, what does this program do? A lot of people get confused by this, and they get confused right at this line. To solve this riddle, I'm going to post the equivalent code side by side with the magic line highlighted. So here's how we solve this riddle. The kind of formula we're using is if and a Boolean expression. And after simplification, it's either true or false. That's the Boolean part. In this first example, it's already simplified. Let's go is true, which means we have a code that says if true. And remember, if the Boolean expression is true, we run the code that's in the if. In the second one, let's go equals to true simplifies to true equals to true, which is true. So these two are the same thing, but the first one is a little bit more streamlined. The second one isn't wrong, but in programming, we'll prefer the first version. You'll see questions like this on the AP exam, so you'll want to know how to solve them. And with that, on to the questions. Question 1. We're asked to consider the following code segment. We're given a procedure, and then we're asked which choice is selection. This question is really to prep you for the create task. To answer, you have to know what selection is. Selection is ifs, so the answer is C. If the question was about conditional statements, the answer would also be C. Other stuff that AP might ask you about have to do with abstraction. Procedures are abstraction. Iteration, for eaches are iteration. And sequencing, which is multiple lines of code. So the answer here is C. Question 2. This is about a really common thing you'll see. It's about translating English to computer science. We're working the problem out. We only want to open if alarm active is true. So that eliminates A and C. We also only want to open if correct pin entered is true, and that eliminates C. So we double check D, it looks good, so there's your answer. Again, this is about translating English to computer science. Question 3. Consider the following code segment when x and y are both equal to 8. So the first line is if 8 is greater than 8, that's false. When the Boolean expression is false, we do the else, which means we display 8 times 8. We displayed 64, and the answer is D. The main concept you need to know here is if the Boolean expression after the if is true, you do the code that's in the if, and if the Boolean expression after the if is false, you do the code that's in the else. Question 4 is similar. Assume x is false and y is true. Which of the code blocks will display the value true? Select 2. The first one is if x is false, so if false, we are not going to display anything. So this is not the answer. Next one is if x and y, so that's if false and true. That's also false, so we're not displaying anything. So we know right away the answer is C and D, but let's try anyway. Next one, C. If x or y is if false or true combines to be true. Since the Boolean expression is true, we run the code that's in the if. We display y, which is true. D. If not x is not false is true. So if true, we're not done yet though. We display x or y, so we display false or true. That's true, we display true, and that is what we're looking for. So the answers here are C and D. Question 5. The following code is intended to set min. It does not work as intended. What set of values shows that the code does not work as intended? Select 2. So the only way to do this one is to try them all out. We start here. If x is less than y, if 10 is less than 20, that is true. So we run the code that's in the if. Min is equal to 10. Then we go on. If y is less than z, if 20 is less than 30, it is. So we run the code in the if, and min is now 20. But we know that min is not 20, so this code is broken, and case A shows it. So that's one of our answers. Testing out B. X is less than y, 30 is less than 20. That's false, so we don't run the code in the if. Checking if 20 is less than 10. Checking y is less than z, or 20 is less than 10. That is false, so we run the code in the else. That means the minimum is z, which is 10. The minimum here is 10, so that one works. Case C, if x is less than y. So if 10 is less than 30, that is true, so the minimum is 10. Then we go on. If y is less than z, so if 30 is less than 20, that is false, so we don't run the code in the if, and instead we run the code in the else. That sets minimum equal to z, which is 20, but that's false because x is 10, which is the minimum. So that's the other one we're looking for. But we can try the last one out. If x is less than y, if 20 is less than 10, that is false, so we don't run the code in the if. Next up, if y is less than z, if 10 is less than 30, that's true, so minimum is equal to y, which is 10. Min is equal to 10. That looks correct, so this code works as intended. So the cases that show the code aren't working are A and C. How do we fix this? That's the subject of topic 3.7, which we'll do next. So I hope this was useful to you. If it was, please give this video a like and subscribe to my channel. I'll see you next time.